Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The UK is preparing to make into law a £5,000 fine for people travelling outside the UK without good reason as the country marks the first anniversary of its first coronavirus lockdown. US officials complain about the results on the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine trial published on Monday, plus 10 people killed in the Colorado mass shooting condemned by the government. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Teniola Shuboale. £5,000, that's how high the fine is for those who travel out of the UK without good reason. It's not law yet, but it's very likely to be from next week. It's part of legislation that will be voted on by MPs on Thursday. Under the current plan for easing restrictions in the UK, the earliest dates that people in England can go abroad for a holiday is May the 17th. However, due to a third wave of COVID-19, it's unlikely that will happen. Legally permitted reasons for foreign travel currently include work, volunteering, education, medical needs, and to attend weddings or funerals. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says restrictions on traveling abroad for leisure are necessary to guard against the importation of large numbers of cases and new variants which might put the vaccine rollout at risk. Meanwhile, all across the UK today, people are remembering the day a year ago when they were first ordered to stay at home to contain the spread of COVID-19. They're also remembering the more than 126,000 people who lost their lives to disease, a toll few people could have imagined in March 2020. At midday, people in Parliament, hospitals, churches, public spaces and offices still mostly empty, with millions working at home due to social distancing rules, fell silent for a minute to honour the dead. Even Queen Elizabeth marked the anniversary by sending spring flowers to South Bethmellows Hospital in London. Official dates show that on March the 23rd, 2020, when Prime Minister Boris Johnson stunned the nation by ordering people to stay at home and shutting down much of the economy, fewer than 1,000 Britons had succumbed to the coronavirus. Well, apart from the Queen, Prince Charles also had a message for the British people today.
Over the past year, our country has been through a trial which has tested our resolve and our resilience in countless ways. We've all been inspired by the resourcefulness we have witnessed, humbled by the dedication shown by so many, and moved beyond words by the sacrifices we have seen. We are emerging from this time with a renewed confidence in one another and with a strengthened faith in our society, richly diverse in its many communities and cultures, but united in its commitment to the common good and the welfare of others, particularly those most vulnerable. As we do so, it is right that we pause to remember those whose lives have been so tragically cut short. As patron of Marie Curie, I am so very proud that this charity, which does so much to help people at the end of their lives, has taken a lead in helping the entire country cope with losses we had never foreseen, but must never forget.
And in other news, US officials say results of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine published on Monday included outdated information and presented an incomplete view of the jab's effectiveness. AstraZeneca has debunked this, saying it was an initial analysis based on data up to an agreed cutoff date of February the 17th, and it would share further analysis with the officials who are in a key body involved in deciding if the jab is approved in the US within 48 hours. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
The highly unusual rebuke from the federal health officials in the United States comes a day after interim data from the drug maker showed better than expected results from the U.S. trial, which had been seen as a scientific counter to concerns that have dogged these shots since late last year. The vaccine, developed with partner Oxford University, was 79% effective in preventing symptomatic illness in the large trial that also took place in Chile and Peru, according to the data. It was also 100% effective against severe or critical forms of the disease and hospitalization, and posed no increased risk of blood clots. President of the French Hospital Federation, Frédéric Vallotton, says the country's hospital system could face an unprecedented violent shock in about 3 weeks if the country fails to curb its vertiginous rise in the COVID-19 cases. Last week, the government imposed a month-long lockdown on Paris and parts of the north after faltering vaccine rollout and spread of highly contagious coronavirus variants forced President Emmanuel Macron to shift course. Norwegian police have begun questioning Prime Minister Erna Solberg over a birthday party she held last month, which could lead to a fine of 10,000 crowns for breaking COVID-19 social distancing rules. The two-term Prime Minister has apologized for celebrating her 60th birthday with 13 family members at a mountain resort, despite the government ban on events attended by more than 10 people. Germany is extending its lockdown until April 18 and calling on citizens to stay at home for 5 days over the Easter holidays to try to break a third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. During talks that ran deep into the night, Chancellor Angela Merkel pushed leaders of the country's 16 states to take a tougher stance to fight the pandemic, reversing plans for a gradual reopening of the economy agreed earlier this month after a sharp rise in the infection rate. Finally, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in today received the AstraZeneca vaccine as he prepares to visit the United Kingdom for a G7 summit in June. The 68-year-old attended a community clinic near his office in downtown Seoul with his wife and 9 other senior officials who will accompany him on the trip, including the National Security Advisor, Soo Hoon.
Away from the COVID-19 pandemic, U.S. authorities have identified the 10 victims killed in the mass shooting inside a grocery store in Colorado on Monday. They also identified the gunman in the attack. He's 21-year-old Hamad Alissa. The victims were between 20 and 65 years old. Earlier today, Vice President Kamala Harris called the shooting absolutely tragic. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more.
10 people in the U.S., including a police officer, were killed after a gunman opened fire in a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. A suspect who appeared to be injured was taken into custody.
The first thing I want to say is I want to say our hearts of this community go out to the victims of this horrific incident. We know of 10 fatalities at the scene, including one of our Boulder PD officers by the name of Eric Talley, who's been on the Boulder Police Department since 2010. The heroic action of this officer when he responded to this scene. At 14:30 hours, the Boulder Police Department began receiving phone calls of shots fired in the area and a phone call about a possible person with a patrol rifle. Officer Talley responded to the scene, was the first on the scene, and he was fatally shot.
This incident has frightened a calm community. One 42-year-old woman who was in the grocery store during the shooting experienced a nightmare.
We were at the checkout, and shots just started going off, and I heard the first one shocked me, and the second one I knew for sure it was a shot, and I said, "Nicholas, get down," and Nicholas ducked, and we just started listening, and there was just repetitive shots, and then there was a brief pause, and I just said, "Nicholas, run," and he said, "No, don't move." I said, "Run right now, we have 3 seconds," and he started running, and then he shot towards us like we could feel it, and we just kept going. we just ran, and there was somebody laying in the road, and I tried to run towards him, and Nicholas pulled me away, and he said, we have to go, and we just ran and hid behind the buildings on the end over here.
The U.S. is facing its second mass shooting in less than 1 week. This has put the federal justice system on high alert to address domestic terror. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Maria joins us now for more on this. Maria, how are authorities processing, this tragic event from Monday, especially coming so soon after last week's shooting in Georgia?
Authorities are obviously awe-stricken, especially those in Colorado, having lost an officer that was just days before that, and the police chief for a ceremony for his son, saving the life of one of his siblings due to CPR. And so this has struck home, especially for those in that community. Obviously, officers throughout the county came to assist Boulder, Colorado, when this mass shooting occurred. But it's definitely time that police units are beginning to rethink the way in which they're policing, and they're beginning to rethink how to really address what many are calling domestic terror.
Authorities have identified the victims and the suspects in this. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, the gentleman, 21-year-old gentleman that is the suspect of this shooting, is being charged with the 10 killings, first-degree murder. He's going to be transported to the actual county jail sometime today. We also know that they have investigated his home, and they have found other rifles, and they've actually updated that the rifle that was used was actually altered for that one, for the shootings. And so they will continue to probably have many of the things in his home under investigation. I'm sure all of his social media accounts and anything else he does technology-wise will be investigated, and we'll be probably finding out more details in the coming hours and definitely within the coming days.
Now, what's the situation now, though, in Boulder and north central Colorado where the shooting took place?
Well, at this time, you obviously have a community that is very nervous. When you have that type of a shooting happening, and you have so many lives that have been taken out, and obviously you're having various memorial services throughout the community of those 10 victims of this deadly shooting. So family members are beginning to remember their loved ones. Communities are rallying behind one another, and they are just beginning to try to heal from a day that was of mass confusion, but really mass destruction. And obviously those stores and businesses in that community are also trying to figure out how do they reopen, and just getting through the trauma that has occurred as a result.
Yeah, really tragic situation there, Maria. Thanks for bringing us up to speed, and do stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
It's another day of voting for Israelis, their fourth general election in 2 years, to be exact, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is likely to win again. The previous 3 elections, a record cycle, ended inconclusively. A unity government, which was formed to break the deadlock, collapsed in December. This election is also unique because it is being held as Israel emerges from lockdown and 2 weeks before Mr. Netanyahu's corruption trial resumes.
It's election day across Israel, a second during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Israelis get tested before casting their ballots. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving head of government, has managed to hold on to power through 2 years of inconclusive elections, despite facing corruption allegations. He's now on trial on bribery and abuse of power charges, which he denies. The voting is on Mr. Netanyahu's political survival, with the veteran leader hoping his role in a rapid COVID-19 vaccine campaign will win him another term. But opinion polls already show the race is too close to call. His right-wing Likud party is expected to win most seats, but fall far short of the 61 needed to be able to form a government without the support of other parties.
Go and vote.
Yair Lapid, a former finance minister who quit Netanyahu's Likud party, set up the centrist Yesh Atid party, which he heads. He has also emerged as Mr. Netanyahu's main challenger. Leaders of the Arab minority are also voting in this election. Parties representing Israel's 21% Arab minority ran on a united slate in a March 2020 election, leading to a surge in turnout that won them 15 of Parliament's 120 seats, their largest ever showing. But a disagreement over whether Arab parties should work with the right-wing premier, with many Arabs accused of discrimination against their community, led one of the factions to split away from the Arab Joint List ahead of the election. President Reuven Rivlin, who voted in Jerusalem, voiced his concern over the unprecedented political crisis and encouraged the public to vote. If no bloc can achieve a workable majority, a fifth round of elections could be called.
Still ahead on the program. Celebrating the Indian festival of Holi during a pandemic. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is attending the NATO summit today in Brussels. During a press conference, he pledged to rebuild and revitalize the transatlantic NATO military alliance and to share American plans on possible withdrawal from Afghanistan. Speaking on his first visit to NATO headquarters, he said the alliance is at a pivotal moment in facing threats around the world as well as climate change.
We have a review underway in the United States. I'm here today in part to share some of our initial thinking with our NATO allies, but maybe even more important, I'm here to listen and consult, because that is what allies do. We heard this the other week at the NATO Defense Ministerial, but it's just as true today. We went in together, we have adjusted together, and when the time is right, we'll leave together. President Biden has been very clear in saying that he believes the pipeline is a bad idea, bad for Europe, bad for the United States. Ultimately, it's in contradiction to the EU's own energy security goals. It has the potential to undermine the interests of Ukraine.
Let's talk to Foreign Affairs commentator Collins Nweke, who joins us from the seat of EU politics, Brussels. Mr. Nweke, it's great to have you join us on the program.
Always my pleasure to be with you.
America is rejoining the world following the actions of the previous administration, which tended to isolate the country. How important do you think America takes NATO now?
America has always taken NATO very seriously. The dividing issue was actually the issue of fair burden sharing between the United States and its European allies. And this particular issue itself is as old as the 60-year-plus NATO. Now, when Donald Trump came into power, I believe that he saw some political capitals to be made out of that particular issue, and so he decided to put it on the front burner. Now, when it received a massive, rejection from left, right, and center, he started making other statements, for example, to the effect that NATO is obsolete, which also was greeted with ignominy, and very quickly he started to take steps to rescind that. Now, when you compare his statements to, with those of members of his cabinet, not the least the vice president, who spoke, barely a month or two after his Brussels statement, you will see that they are at variance with his statement. Now, what we are seeing with, the administration of Biden is the fact that Biden developed the slogan, America is back. Now, their role in this crucial, critical meeting aimed at, discussing the way forward for NATO is actually aimed at reasserting America's authority, but doing that, emphasizing a partnership, like the Secretary of State said, partners listen to one another and they also observe. And so America is now taking the lead in that process.
Okay, just very quickly, if you can, what impact do you think this mending of ties with NATO could impact on security in Africa and, of course, the rest of the world?
The focus of NATO going forward is counter-terrorism, among other things. And as you know, the main terrorist blocs, ISIS and the rest of them, are very much present in Africa. Cyber security is also another very important issue that they are looking for. Now, when you look at that very critically, you will see that some of these major terrorist, bodies have antennas in Africa, including Nigeria. At this moment, because they are focusing on it, I believe that Africa will become much more critical for them. And I see two areas that NATO is actually navigating to. One is providing, surveillance that they can then use in churning out policies. So surveillance in Africa, that will help them to make out the right policies. And then also, beyond providing advisory services to ministries of defense in Africa, I see NATO actually conducting more training, short of boots on the ground. So there are, of course, a number of other areas, but these are areas that will help to shore up security in Africa and, by extension, global security.
All right, thanks again, Mr. Nweke. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you on The World Today.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Finally on the program, there was no stopping this year's celebration of India's Holi as thousands of devotees gathered in the northern Mathura district on Monday as they began the Hindu Festival of Colours, despite the country reporting more than 40,000 new coronavirus cases in the past 24 hours. Smeared in different colours, devotees from across the country were seen collecting sweets called ladus, dancing and singing at temples as they celebrated the festival, flouting mask and social distancing rules. Many even indicated they knew nothing about the pandemic. Celebrated at the onset of spring, Holi holds a mythological importance, that of the triumph of good over evil. It's also associated with the eternal love of Hindu Lord Krishna and his consort Radha, and a riot of colours. Though Holi is a single-day festival elsewhere in India, it's almost a 10-day affair in Mathura. And that's The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.